Durant, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to talking with everyone about strategies to cope following school and community mass violence. You know, our nation right now is in pain. We've just had another really tragic incident, and I just thought this would be really fitting to be able to share. And instead of focusing on the problem, but ways that we can heal and take care of ourselves and take care of one another. So, just a little bit about me. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a therapist, and the company that I own is located here in New Orleans, Louisiana. It's called DuraCare Counseling and Consulting Services. I have a doctorate in naturopathic medicine. I'm a licensed professional counselor, licensed in both Louisiana and Texas. I'm also a registered play therapist and a former school teacher and guidance counselor. So I live in a community and in a world that's heavily impacted by what's going on. I feel it. And I think even after this most recent experience, being a new mom, I felt the worry, the anger, the frustration, the sadness, because I'm at this stage right now of exploring schools for my son to go to. So I can connect with you on a personal level, on an emotional level, and then also as a professional who's been working and supporting families and children and clients the last 15 years with different ways of being able to cope with adversity and life challenges. So let's talk about some things that we can do to kind of take care of ourselves in the midst of all that's going on in recent times in our country and our community and in our schools. I thought this is a really important quote and an important photo in light of everything that's transpired in recent months. But at Joe Baca is a professional representative, and here he's quoted as saying, "School violence is a serious problem that endangers students, interferes with learning, and it harms our community." And so we can see just at the recent incident that happened at Robb Elementary in Texas a few weeks back, the impact and the grieving and the memorials that's been left behind. So oftentimes when we have situations and circumstances like this, it it definitely triggers and elicits some kind of grief and emotional response. And so we can connect with all the different emotions that might exist, whether it be sadness, anger, grief, despair, loss, depression, and the list goes on, you know. But some common things that you may discover or notice about yourself or those that you're looking after, those in your family or your household, is difficulty focusing. Some of us may have experienced shakes, especially when looking at media images and hearing the constant conversations about that. Maybe even having increased fear and worries. And I know that following the incident, that was one of the number one things that came to my mind as a new mom. Oh my goodness, maybe I should consider homeschooling my son. Definitely following the incident, I had the loss of appetite, and many of us can connect to that. Some of us respond differently, and we may have increased appetite, and we just have the munchies that are used to try and calm our fears. You may have noticed in your younger ones, especially if schools have had increased violence prevention measures and doing increased drills, or schools are now talking about it with their students, that maybe they're a little bit more clingy. Definitely children that were directly affected or seeing the media images and constantly hearing about the tragedies that have occurred in our country may have increased nightmares, clinginess, a desire to hold on to their parents or loved ones, increased aggression and combativeness. So, you know, maybe some children may respond by saying, "Hey, if a bad guy comes to my school or my home, I'm going to fight them back and I'm going to do this." And so you see maybe some defiance or increased aggressive behaviors, a desire to pull out the toy guns and the combat fatigues and take on a protective stance amongst themselves. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that impacts on our children. Nausea and upset stomach, trouble eating and difficulty sleeping, interrupted sleep or difficulty falling asleep altogether. A lot of people have commented on difficulties that they've experienced with breathing and chest pain and just feeling in this perpetual state of anxiety and worry, anger, irritability, avoiding social connections and social situations. And unfortunately, some have used alcohol or other drugs to try and cope and numb those feelings and those worries that they're experiencing. So, this is just a snapshot of some of the things that persons in your family or community, or even you personally, may be dealing with in the midst of everything that's going on, whether it be school shootings or grocery store shootings. Um, I live in the greater New Orleans area. There was recently a shooting at a high school graduation. So it's just the violence and the mass violence and all the different settings that's impacting our communities and our homes and neighborhoods. It's definitely something that's not positive, and it's definitely something that's having a significant emotional impact on all of us in some form or fashion. So let's talk a little bit about our body and how our body communicates this. You know, as I mentioned, as I was watching the news and received word of what occurred initially in New York at the grocery store shooting, out in Texas at the school, and then also at a high school graduation here in Louisiana, I definitely noticed myself feeling tense, increased stress. I had difficulty focusing and concentrating. I felt this tightness in my chest, and I actually took my son and held on to him really tight for a little bit, and I could connect to what I was seeing and what I was thinking and how my body was communicating that worry and that stress. And we're all that way. It's basically a stress reaction. And our body communicates that when there's a change in our environment or our circumstances, we feel it. And so look at the image in front of you, and maybe there are some areas on here that you can definitely recognize when I'm under stress while I was watching the news or talking with family members, how I may have felt in these moments. I shared with you I had difficulty focusing. So I know I immediately set a pause to my day and seeing clients in that moment because I needed to kind of reset myself. It was almost a struggle trying to find words and also to be present immediately in the aftermath of having receiving that news. I felt a sense of worry, and where worry feels within me is tightness in my shoulders and tightness in my chest. And as you can see from the um, the image, it starts in our head because we're thinking about all the concerns and fears, but then we physically feel it with increased heartbeat. The blood is having to pump faster and harder. We feel it with the tightness in our chest, maybe because we're having that stress response in the sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, fawn response is activated. So now our breathing is more quickened and it's trying to send oxygen throughout the body. A lot of people may feel all of a sudden with really bad negative news, as what we've experienced recently, upset stomach, and it may be the desire to go to the bathroom or the desire to go and vomit. Sometimes our skin becomes a little sweaty and oily, maybe tension and headaches. If we've already struggled with depression or anxiety, perhaps in moments like that, we are experiencing increased symptoms. We already talked about trouble breathing and panic attacks and different things like that. So pay attention to how your body is communicating with you when you're having a stress response following news or having to relive news of really violent mass incidents of impacting our community, our loved ones. Because then when we recognize those things, there are also some proactive strategies that we can implement and incorporate to help ourselves feel a little bit better. And we're going to talk about a couple of tips and strategies in a few moments. So, violence, any type of violence, is a really bad thing, and it shakes our sense of safety. It often induces increased fear and worry. And so, how does that impact our overall mental health? You know, well, you might notice feeling a little bit edgy and feeling on guard. You might notice that you're not doing and engaging in your typical routines. Maybe when you go to the grocery store and before you might be on your cell phone, engaged in conversation and not really alert. And then you're in grocery stores now and you're really hyper vigilant and you're looking around. Or perhaps after the New York mass violence incident, you say, you know what, I'm not going to go to the grocery store for a while. And you're doing, car pickups or home deliveries. Some, and as I mentioned earlier, we see this often with children where we may notice increased defensive behavior and acting out, maybe an increased desire to be protective. And, I'm going to pull out my weapons and my guns and make sure that I carry them on me because I have to protect myself. And maybe children absorb that energy and say, hey, I'm brave, I'm not afraid. And they're pulling out their toy guns and have a desire to be in a protective nature. You may even notice having increased negative thoughts and feelings. I'm not safe. What's happening in this world? Will the world in America ever get better? The negative feelings, feeling perpetually anxious and worried, increased panic attacks, difficulty sleeping, where we may struggle falling asleep or we have interrupted sleep. Um, or we start having nightmares and we're replaying some of the things that we've seen in media or on social media, and it's replaying and our sleep and interrupting our sleep. And then, as expressed earlier, sometimes children may act out aggressively or they may withdraw. Sometimes trauma exposure in children induces clinginess, regressive behavior, where maybe they never had a problem with bedwetting, but all of a sudden that's happening, increased tears and crying spells, and different things like that. And a big question, especially for those that are struggling and they're recognizing that their feelings and their energy has shifted, is how long will I feel like this? When will I get back to normal? And we don't rush the process. We're aware and we acknowledge our feelings. And for some, we may be able to bounce back to a level of normalcy and stability within a couple of days to a couple of weeks. Others of us who perhaps may have had a traumatic response or had direct traumatic experiences previously struggle with anxiety, depression, or other mental disorders may struggle for a long period of time, a longer period of time. And what matters is not the time frame. What matters is how can we cope and take care of ourselves and take care of each other in the midst of everything that you're feeling and everything that you're experiencing. So here are a couple of tips and a couple of strategies. Talk about your feelings. Don't bottle them in. Often what I share with clients is the Coke bottle or Coke can metaphor. So think about it like this. If I asked you to go in your refrigerator, grab a Coke can, shake it, point it towards yourself, then open it, most everyone would say, absolutely not, Dr. Wendy. And the reason for that is because we know if we've dropped a Coke or we've shaken a Coke and we immediately open it, it's going to be a nasty, explosive mess and get all over us. Well, if we bottle our feelings, it's similar to the shaking Coke can effect. Bottling those feelings within inside of us are basically those expanded carbon bubbles, like what we see in a shaking Coke can. And it's looking for a way to get out. We're looking for relief. So instead of bottling our feelings up, let's talk about them. Let's journal. Let's find someone that we can share that experience with, maybe a loved one, a family member, a therapist, a faith leader. Doesn't matter, but try and release those feelings and don't hold on to them. Release those worries by sharing them with others, writing them on in your journal notebook, using your video diary or your audio diary to just kind of get it out and not hold it within you. Make sure, even when you don't have a desire to eat, you just want to lay down in bed, you have to take care of ourselves. Food is fuel. Fuel helps us to be able to move and it energizes us to be our best. So we may not go and eat a steak dinner when we're struggling emotionally, but fruits, vegetables, hydrating with water, all of those things are really good to fuel our body and take care of our body so that we're able to continue to move. Exercise, get out in nature, sit out in your backyard if you have it, or sit on the porch. Vitamin D from the sun is very healing. It soothes our anxiety. It's comforting. Well, maybe not comforting in that 93-degree New Orleans weather heat or those really high temperatures that we may sometimes experience in Texas or other parts of the country. So, in moments like that, we may choose to go outside earlier in the day, later in the afternoon, but move, be out in nature, and make sure you're taking time to rest. Even if it's not sleeping, taking time to just lean back, lay in a chair, lay in your bed as appropriate, and give yourself time to rest. Connect with comforting hobbies. So, this is a really good time to read a good book. If you're into drawing and art, pull out your easel and your pad and your paint and your pencils. Write, share your story, share your thoughts and your experiences. Whatever hobbies and interests offer comfort and reprieve for you. And as mentioned earlier, connect with a therapist, your faith leaders, your trusted friends. Journal your thoughts and feelings. So, some things that are very specific and recommended by the American Psychological Association for adults and children. Again, stay healthy, proper nutrition and exercise. Use your neighbors in your community as a support. We heal together, we grow together, we talk together, we grieve together. So, try really hard not to self isolate, but talk to your loved ones and your neighbors and those in your community. Um, Avoid alcohol and drugs. Those tend to numb us. And even if we don't necessarily have a problem with alcohol or substances, it in times of distress, it's very easy to overuse or misuse, and we want to avoid that. It's okay to unplug and turn off the news and turn off social media, so it doesn't have to be these incidents something that we're constantly feeding into our lives, into our homes, into our environments and places of peace. So unplug and limit exposure. And then most importantly, be mindful of the type of news and information that you're receiving. Social media oftentimes is not verified. It's not always accurate. Some of the posts and the images that are shared and things like that. So you want to make sure you're trying to get credible information, and not often the opinions of others that could be very triggering for some of us. For children and youth, try really hard to maintain home and school routines. I know in communities that were immediately impacted, schools have closed, but getting up early, getting dressed, getting out of bed, having a healthy breakfast, these are all routines that can continue whether school's in session or not. Pay attention to your young ones for physical symptoms. If they're complaining of tummy aches or headaches and having nightmares and different things like that, you want to be mindful. You might want to schedule an appointment with their healthcare provider for an evaluation. Really focus on the positive that's happening in the community. So, in spite of all the horrible incidents that we've experienced, I think it's also helped to contribute to drawing our community closer together. People are talking, people are active and wanting to make some changes to laws and policies. People are sharing and healing together. So, here in New Orleans, following the shooting at the graduation, there was a community vigil where members of the community could get together and hug each other and pray together and have a moment of silence and things like that. So look out for opportunities, and if you feel safe and comfortable participating with your community, that's a positive way to facilitate healing and to heal together. Uh, Embrace time together as a family. Really, we shouldn't be isolating. So even if it's playing a game together as a family, listening to music, talking about our feelings, our worries, our concerns together, but also planning and thinking of ways to heal, cope, and plan for the future as a family is very helpful. And again, engage in hobbies and fun activities. So, what we have here is a tool that I've developed for clients in my practice, um, and I've used it with COVID, but also ABC strategies for coping with the aftermath of uh, community violence. And it's letters A through Z with various ideas for coping. So, A being asked for help, making sure that we breathe when we're feeling really anxious and our body is communicating the stress response, the power of our breath and activating that parasympathetic response, the rest, calm, digest response that our body can do naturally. Take in a nice deep belly breath, slow, controlled exhale. Count. Sometimes just counting to 10 or counting backwards can be helpful. Doing a dance to your favorite song. Another one of my favorite ones is hugging a loved one. Actually, our body releases a hormone called oxytocin, and it's a very calming hormone when we feel anxious and overwhelmed. So, parents may recognize this perhaps when they had an infant and the baby wasn't hungry and the baby wasn't sleepy and the baby didn't need to be changed, but they just wanted to be embraced. And that warm sensation feeling that's very soothing for you as a parent, but also soothing for the child, and it calms and quiets a child. So physical touch and physical contact with those that we trust and love when we're feeling overwhelmed and anxious is a really good way to be able to cope and take care of ourselves and take care of each other. It's super important that we're mindful of our thoughts and we don't allow ourselves to get stuck in this negative cycle of intrusive thoughts. So, try to ignore those negative thoughts, block them, find reasons to laugh, identify your emotion, meditate. It's okay to take a pause. Um, Another one, again, is a repeat. Unite with family, watch something happy, exhale, zone out, participate in yoga, be kind to yourself, be kind to one another. Sing, read a book, alleviate the stressor maybe by unplugging from social media or from the news media. Here are a couple of helpful community resources for support. The suicide hotline. There's the disaster distress helpline. You can call or text it. If you're a Spanish speaking person, just remember to press 2. For parents that are trying to assist or look for resources to help their children, visit www.nctsn.org. And then the Transcend mobile app, which you can download if you have Apple access, iOS, or Android access. And it assists with helping and ideas of being able to recover from mass violence. This app was developed by the National Mass Violence and Victimization Resource Center. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity to connect with you guys, and thank you for the time.